Today I'm going to be making the junk journal that I'll be using for the Junk Journal January 2025 challenge. If you haven't seen the announcement, I'll link the video down below with all the details, but essentially it's a month-long junk journaling challenge. There's a new prompt every day. We've got 30 different creators sharing their takes for each day, so if you're looking for inspiration maybe on what to put in the pages of your junk journal if you're just getting started, or you want some new ideas for things to try with your journaling. It's just a great way to get inspiration and also to get involved with a great community of people all creating in their junk journals. It's one of my favorite times of the year. So for previous challenges, I have created all sorts of different shapes and sizes when it comes to the journals. I've done no-sew journals like the accordion style. I've also done just like the standard bound journal in a standard TN size. And I'm always using like anything I have on hand in the true like junk journaling spirit. So you'll see me using like recycled paper, packaging, envelopes, paper scraps from my studio, like literally anything I can get my hands on. I will save it and then use it in journals like this, because I think one of the most fun things about making a junk journal like this, where you're literally just using a mix and match of all sorts of different like papers, you get all the different textures and you have something to respond to on the page each day. So I think it makes creating in your journal a lot easier, because you don't have that fear of the blank page, because you've got all these interesting papers to use. And I also like to have my pages be different sizes as well when I bind them, so that you can kind of see the different pages when you're working in it, and so it creates a really fun layered effect. So that's why I've decided to go for a bound journal this time round, and I also wanted to keep it really easy in terms of keeping up with the challenge. So I've decided to go for a smaller size, which is the number one thing that I recommend if you are new to junk journaling or new to a challenge like this. I find having a smaller journal so much easier to work with, and you don't feel as intimidated by having all that blank space. So it's just a lot easier to fill it up and to have that sense of accomplishment, I suppose. It's almost like the instant gratification of filling up a page, but I really do find it easier, especially if you do want to have a bit of that like daily creative habit, which I think is something that, especially, in January for the new year, I know it's something that we all think about in terms of like habits and things like that. So I definitely recommend a smaller journal. I think me personally, like I just prefer working in the smaller format. I find that when I make my journals, I do always gravitate to something that is, sort of A6-ish in size. So the one that I'm working in is going to be a passport size, which is slightly smaller again. So you saw there at the beginning, I just had my passport sized traveler's notebook, and I just used a junk journal that I had clearly started and haven't finished, just as the template for creating the rest of these pages. So I'm going to keep this journal inside that passport traveler's notebook, and that way I think it's going to help it to, become part of my lineup of journals that I'm going to be working in, and it will just be a nice way to keep it within that. So I'm using all sorts of different papers, as I mentioned. But what I realized as I was flipping through the completed journal is that I have used pages that are envelopes or like bags like this from just packaging. And so some of them, when I've folded them in half to become the journal pages, they will also be like pockets within the journal. So that's a really fun and easy way to just add a page that will give you more space to add more paper in, because who doesn't like that? So they're either pocket pages, or I have done quite a few patchwork pages, which is where I've got paper scraps and bits and pieces that aren't big enough to fit even in a passport size journal like this. And so, what you'll see I end up doing as I'm going through the different papers to add to this journal is that I am joining them together. So, either by using glue or even some washi tape, I'm just joining pieces together to make larger pages. So, sometimes two sheets of paper, sometimes like three, just to create like an easy patchwork fashion to the pages, which again just immediately adds the interest to the page that you're going to be working on. I also think it makes a really nice, like, scrappy look to the journal, which I think when it comes to junk journaling as well is just something that I really enjoy having with that eclectic mix of all the different papers. And so, yeah, it's like a patchwork pocket journal almost. Passport patchwork pocket journal. Say that 10 times fast. But that's essentially what I have created for this round of the challenge. And I think once I had finished, moving the papers around and deciding which order I wanted them in and how I wanted them all to sit within the journal, I think I had around about 10 to 12 pieces of paper because they're all different sizes and thicknesses. But I know a common question for a challenge like this is normally like, how many pages do I need to include within my journal to be able to, you know, journal all of the 31 prompts? And it depends how you want to approach the journaling itself. So, if you know that you like to do double page spreads, for example, then you will need extra pages. Or if you only journal on one side of the page, then obviously you won't need as many. There is obviously the option as well of having tip ins and adding extra pages, having fold out pages, having things within pockets. So, like, you might just work one day on a tag and include that within the journal. So then that's not counted in the number of pages that you need, if you see what I mean. So, it really does depend on how you want to journal. That's one of the things I think is really good about the no sew journal if you wanted to do just the simple, like, no sewing accordion journal, because if you're working in that and you realize that you haven't made it long enough and you haven't got enough space, then you can quite literally just like cut it in half or rip it up and add in the additional pages. So I'll leave down below a link to the tutorial where I've made the no sew journal, but also one of the videos where I actually did cut it in half, so you can kind of see the process of repairing it and sort of inserting extra pages into your journal. But even with a bound journal like this, you can have the tipped in pages, so just with some washi tape or a sticker, you can add in the additional pages. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to end up doing it with this journal. I kind of like to just sort of feel out how I'm going to be working in the journal, because sometimes I have a prompt and I think, okay, that's going to need like a double page spread. And then other times I don't need as much space. So it really just depends how you're working in it. If you aren't sure how you're going to approach some of the prompts, you could even just work on like loose sheets of paper or like not bind your journal yet. And then when it comes to the end of the challenge and you know that you've got all of the pages that you need, then you can bind it at the end. But it's all about what works for you, because we're just having fun in our journals. And when it comes to deciding which order to put the pages within the journal before you bind it, I like to just sort of almost try out different positions for the pages. So you'll see me sort of moving things around and seeing what fits and what doesn't, because some pages will complement others, whereas others might not look as good when you layer them, especially if you're using like different shapes and sizes of papers. So you'll see me constantly like flicking through like this and seeing like, what does it look like? Does it look like it's in the right order? And I think something that I'm often thinking is balance when it comes to my journal pages. So if I've got, papers that are a bit more busy, so maybe like pages that are from books with text, or they've got patterns on them, I'll try and like intersperse them between pages that are a bit more plain, so that you have that balance and you don't have such cluttered pages followed by a load of plain pages, if that makes sense. So, I might go like a book page and then some tea dyed paper, and then it might be like an envelope that say has got quite a lot of not visual interest in terms of pattern, but it might have a lot of like texture to it. And then I might have, like a brown piece of paper that's a lot more plain. And so, not necessarily doing literally like patterned and then plain, patterned and plain, but I kind of like to spread it out so that when you flick through the journal as a whole, when you go through the signature, there's a bit more cohesion between all of the different papers. And I think one of the ways that you can find that out is purely just by moving the papers around and seeing which order you want them to be in before you bind them. So don't be afraid to kind of shuffle them around a bit and think about which order you want them in before it comes to actually doing the sewing for the binding. So for this journal, I'm going to be doing just a really basic pamphlet stitch, just the figure of 8, where you poke the 3 holes in the journal. If you want a more like detailed and like slowed down explanation of how to do this, I'll leave a link down below. I've done a tutorial on it so that you can follow along if you want to bind your journal like this. But one of my all-time favorite go-to methods to put together an easy junk journal is to just bind it into a pamphlet stitch like this. So my only advice to you would be make sure you're not using like loads of thick papers together, because it will make pushing the needle through that a lot harder, and you don't want pages to like rip or fall out of the journal. So make sure you're not putting too many pages in, but it does depend on the thickness of the pages you're using. So there's no like golden rule, I don't think, in terms of like, this is the amount of pages that you should include, because it does depend, like, have you got like 10 really thin pieces of paper, or have you got like 10 pieces of cardstock, for example? And often with junk journals, you do have that mix of all the different papers. So you can see here, even with these patchwork pages, there's a mix in terms of the thickness on them, because they've got everything from a more sort of sturdy book page through to the brown paper packaging, which is not fragile, but it's a lot thinner. It's that stuff that they sort of pack into boxes, which I always save from every delivery that I have and squirrel it away, because I know that one day I will eventually use it. And I do like to use it for like patterned paper and stuff, and it just always comes in handy. I have a whole entire video on how you can make collage papers with your brown paper, if that's a rabbit hole that you'd like to fall down, because it's just such a great junk journaling resource. Like, it's free, it comes in the packaging, and there's so many different ways that you can use it. I think I use brown paper in literally every junk journal or like junk journal spread. It's just such an iconic staple of junk journaling. So yeah, as you'll see, I've got all sorts of like crumpled papers and scraps and things that I've pulled off from other projects that I've clearly just had saved. And so I'm also going through and just starting to add a few little bits of interest to pages, just to give me something to start with on the background. And I might come to the page and actually decide, what, I'm going to cover this entire thing up, but I think it just really helps having something on the page. So as you'll have seen, I just added a couple of bits throughout that were smaller pieces to the pages in order to embellish them a little bit. And I also have papers that are sticking out of the top and the bottom and the edges of this journal. This is by no means perfect, and I actually quite like the way that papers do peek out of the edges, and when you add like tags and ribbons and tabs to them as well. So I haven't bothered, trimming the edges and making it look perfect, because to me, that's not really what junk journaling is about. I'm really looking forward to working in this journal, and you'll notice that I've actually kept the cover of this just the plain brown from the packing paper, and that's because if you've seen the prompts for Junk Journal January, the prompt for day 1 is cover, and it's also my day in the collaboration to kick off that month of fun of creators from all around the world, but I'm going to show you on day one how I decorate the cover for this journal because I think it's a really great way to set the tone for the journal and, sort of break it in a little bit. So that's what I'm going to be doing on day one of the challenge, showing you how I've decorated this cover. But I think brown paper covers are one of my favorites to work with because they're really versatile in terms of what you can do to them. So I really hope that you join me for the Junk Journal January challenge. Like I said, I will leave all the information down below that you need to join in. There will be a playlist for the collaboration. We've got the daily prompt list. There's just so much fun happening. So let me know down below in the comments if you've made it this far what journal you're going to be using for this challenge. What different papers have you used? Maybe you've got like a colour scheme going on or a different theme for this journal. Are you digging out one of the journals that you have created in the past but you've not worked in it or you've not finished it? I just love to know what journals you're going to be using. It's always one of my favourite things seeing how different everyone's journals are that we work on, but they're always so full of creativity and such fun papers. So let me know in the comments, and I hope you've enjoyed joining me for making this junk journal for the challenge. As always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.